Hello everybody, we just reached 100 subscribers, and to celebrate that I asked you guys to send me some of your tracks so that I can give you some feedback on it. Of course, the feedback will be influenced by my personal taste and my personal experience with these different genres, but I do think that I will have some objective points to give, and I think everyone can learn something from all the feedback that I will give. So let's just start right away. And the first track is The Essence by @leo.sgs08. So thank you for your submission, and let's go and listen to it. Yeah, I really like it already, very immersive. Sound design is very nice here. Okay, so I think this transition, so the intro was really good, the sound design was really nice. I like the contrast of different sounds. You know, you have the warm arpeggio sounds and the warm pad sound in the back, and then you have these field recordings and these little laser sounds and everything. So nice contrast in sound design, and love the detail, love the immersiveness. But here the transition from the end of the intro into the drop is not quite there. I think it could be smoother. I like the idea, but I think to make it smoother, I would remove the lower frequencies of this arpeggio right before the drop. So for example, let me just show you what I mean. So I think all of this information here could be reduced right before the drop to create a maximum contrast before the full impact. Because when we remove this frequency range, we are starting to crave this warm and this low end energy again. And when the kick and bass drops, this will give even more satisfaction if we remove all this area a little bit. So I would try to filter out the arpeggio a bit more. And also we can even see it from the waveform itself. The intro is louder than the actual drop, and I think it should be the other way around. I would try to reduce the volume of the intro a bit more so that the kick and bass and the actual drop has a maximum impact. But I like the idea that you let the delay tail of this arpeggio still playing throughout. And here it's a nice idea with these arpeggio hits, but I would make them quieter because right now they're too much in the front and I think they're not as important right now. So something like that. And by the way, the kick and bass, really clean, really crisp, very nice. I mean, it's a decent mix for now. I would, again, there's much going on here. There's a lot going on in this area here. So I try to reduce a little bit of this area. So again, the arpeggio, maybe control it a bit more. Maybe I would put something like a dynamic equalizer, so to control this area a bit more. I would put it on the arpeggio, I think. You have added all these little laser sounds and this little ear candy. And I think if we put this arpeggio a bit more down, all these ear candy will be more visible and more hearable and more enjoyable. And I think this will give the track even more immersiveness and will give it a bit more dimension. That's very nice. Very well done here. The overall progression makes sense. Everything makes sense here, and this little break, this little silence right before the change of the groove, change into the full groove. Very well done. Nothing to say here. I would maybe even bring this chord step that plays right at the start. I would let it play again, because I think it's really good. I really like it, and I think it deserves to play again. I think this transition, it makes sense that you would have like a little break in here, but I think this, I really like this glitchy vocal type of thing, but I think it would work even better if you would put this vocal to the front and not to the back like this, because then this would create this, you know, to bring the energy back to the front and to push it back outward again when the next part comes in here, just to create more tension, right? Okay, here I think the energy drops too much, so I would try to keep the drums playing and maybe filter them out, or filter them in a way that they are glued together with the kick and bass, so that the track still feels like one whole thing. The melody here, I think, is too chaotic from what I've heard from the track for now. I feel like this track needs something a bit more stable, a bit more memorable or recognizable, because it's very well structured, it's rather simple, so I would try to keep the melody less complex and more simple, and try to find a rhythm that is a bit simpler or easier to understand, because for me right now it's too jumpy, it's too difficult to follow, it kind of messes with the whole flow. So I would work on this melody here. Here it's very nice that you kept the melody, but you changed the sound to keep the track flowing and have a nice transition. So well done here. The vocal here is a bit difficult to understand. It's like it's hiding behind the sounds a little bit, so I would try to push it a bit more to the front. So maybe push the high hand a little bit and reduce the mid area. Just try to separate it from the rest of the track, because right now it's a bit, it sounds muffled and yeah, like it's hiding.
What to keep and what to lose. You know that's exactly the process of many things in life. That real truth in this process. Let this stand with adult.
But the arpeggio coming up here is very nice.
Stand with adult explanation. Everything will find.
And that's what I mean with a simpler melody. This fits really well in the track. It's simple, but it works really well. And I will try to find something similar for the part in here.
Stand with adult explanation. Everything will find its way to get to your place. And as you know, sometimes you feel like you're lost when enough is enough. But
That was a nice transition, smooth
Wait.
transition. Well done.
and step back. That's the essence.
Okay, so what I like here is that you let the whole groove play right from the beginning without, you know, first starting with the dry kick and bass. So that's a nice change, and it really keeps the energy up. So that's really nice. But again, the melody here, too complex for me, too chaotic, too jumpy. There's, it feels like there's a flow missing, you know, it's goes up and down a bit too much. So yeah, maybe try to find a melody that flows a bit more naturally with this track. Yeah, it definitely goes up and down too much for me here. That's a nice change to the energy, and to keep building up the tension even more, you introduce these chord changes or these different bass root notes. So well done here, it works for me. Overall, I would say the kick and the bass may be too quiet for me. Just the feeling that I'm getting here. Let me see. Yeah, the kick and bass is definitely too quiet for me here. elements. Okay, so here I think the arpeggio that is building up until the end and filtering out, I think this arpeggio is not necessary. I think you can leave this melody out because the track is over now. There's no need to rise the energy here. And I think you have enough material to make a nice immersive outro. And at the same time, it's more difficult for DJs to make a transition here if there's a melody coming in. In general, melodic elements in an outro or in a transition part for a DJ is much more difficult. So yeah, I think I would just leave the arpeggio here. I think it's not necessary, not important in this part. So the artist here obviously understands the energy flow and the structure of a track. Every part makes sense to me in a storytelling point of view. And I really like also the drums. They are coming out nicely, and the immersiveness in the track and the use of the three-dimensional space. Yeah, but again, I would look at the melodies and try to find something simpler. For example, the melody from the transition into the break. I really liked this arpeggio. It was simple. Transitions were really nice, and the kick and bass was clean. The drums were clean, but the kick and bass needs a bit more power, a bit more volume. Yeah, overall decent mix. Well done. I think there's not much more to do here, and I would say you're almost done with this track. Keep going. Okay, now let's listen to the second track. This one is Venus Pixie. This one was sent by @vinsats on Instagram. Thank you for your submission. Let's listen to it. Nice intro. Again, I really love the different sound design, like the contrast from the high bling sounds and the low pad in the background. So it creates a really nice space. So it's really interesting so far. The drums for me, in comparison to the rest of the sound, feel a bit too lifeless, too static. Sound doesn't change much. I would try to maybe put a filter on it, maybe put some kind of effect on it, or maybe play with the velocity so that it fits more with the rest of the sounds, because the other sounds have a lot of life, a lot of movement. And I would try to adapt this to the sound of the drums. so this is a nice rhythm. I really like it. It's very interesting. It sounds very unique, but maybe I would try to put some elements away, to put the focus on the kick and bass rhythm and on the drop, on the impact of the drop. So maybe try to remove some elements, and I'm thinking mostly about the drums. This little break is a nice idea, but I think it messes with the flow a bit too much, because after a break like this, where everything else is silenced, I would expect a big different change to come right after it, but there is not much of a change here except some more drum elements and a higher octave on the chords, I think. So I would try to either not make a break at all, or if you want to introduce a break, I would keep it simple and I wouldn't drop all the other elements away, because after this break again I would expect something totally different, and at the same time, I mean, the track just started and it takes some time to get into the track, and to keep this flow moving, I wouldn't introduce a break this early. But it's a really nice rhythm in these drums in here, you know, the little hats. Very nice rhythm. This little break makes more sense to me, so I would really just let the track keep playing here and just keep this break in here. So here I really like this change of bassline, where the bass has some kind of a rise glitch effect to it, which I really like, and it makes totally sense for me and it works well. But I'm kind of disappointed that it only plays for this long, then it's filtering away again. I would try to either let it play earlier in here and then keep it playing until here, and then drop this break. Because for me, again, this break doesn't make much sense to me. It makes sense to have this little break right before the bassline change, but the bassline change is only playing for that long. And so in this context, this little break doesn't make sense to me. And then I would rather bring this bassline earlier, so in this part, or let it keep playing for longer, because I really like it. I think it sounds really nice. But this part here, I really like it. It's a really nice change to the first part here, because you remove the drums, creates a nice change of the space here. So well done. No, it feels like I'm getting some time to breathe here. Nice chord progression, works for me. That's a good place to have a break in your track, so that makes sense. And also really like, you still have the double time kick and bass and some other plucky elements that keep the track going forward. But at the same time, I like that you introduce like some kind of bass or low mid frequency elements that is playing in halftime. So it's really nice to have double time and halftime playing at the same time. Okay, so I feel like the whole break, it's taking me a bit too long. I think the energy needs too much time to build up again, especially because the part before doesn't last very long. And in that context, I think the break is a bit too long. And it seems like the track is ending already. So also in that context, the break is too long in comparison to the part that's coming afterwards. And you're making it sound like something really big is coming, this big build-up, this long build-up. And I mean, the kick and bass is a bit different, it sounds a bit dirty and a bit more like hard techno than psytrance, which is a nice change, but for me is not powerful enough to legitimize this long break. And at the same time, I mean, even though the kick and bass sound is different than from the first part, the rhythm, it's still exactly the same. And so for me, it's not enough of a change, enough of an impact to have this long build-up or this long break. So for me, it takes a bit too much time to get back into the track. Let's listen to the end here. I think overall, I really like the little sound design, the little ear candy, these little laser bling sounds on the sides and in the back. I love that. I love how unique this track sounds. It sounds very fresh. But I think to improve this track, I think you could again introduce this bass line. I think you could introduce this bassline change for longer, maybe introduce it earlier, and also this little change in groove in these little hi-hats. I would try to put the focus on exactly those unique grooves, exactly those unique bass lines, and try to create bigger parts out of this. Yeah, keep the break shorter. Look at the whole track. You know how long the kick and bass part is in the first part, and then look how short the kick and bass part is in the second part. Compared to the break, to me, it's not enough. Maybe it's still a work in progress. Maybe you're still planning to add another part. If you do plan on adding another part, I would, just as I said in the first part, I would try to focus on the changes in bass lines to make it more interesting, more engaging, and to give the feeling of a development in your story. Yeah, I think in terms of mix, there's not much to be done here. You're almost there. I think it's just some minor changes, nothing too important. Yeah, I would try to let the high end shine a bit more, because I think this is the area that makes this track pretty special. There's a lot going on in there, especially those little blips and blobs and the crispiness of the pad and the hi-hats, the drums. I think you could allow yourself to put them out a bit more, because I think this is one of the best parts of this track, and one of the most unique parts of this track is this brilliance, and so I would amplify on this brilliance, so bring these elements up a bit more. That's it with this track. Again, I think the most work to do here is on the arrangement, using your unique little parts to expand some bigger chapters in this track. Okay, now let's listen to the last track. Okay, so this one is from @vex or psyvexx on Instagram. Thank you for your submission. Let's have a listen to it. Okay, so I think the start is a bit too abrupt here. It's like I'm opening up a book in the middle randomly and jump into the story right in the middle. I think it would make sense to leave out some elements, let the track build up slowly. Just at the start, you can do wild stuff within your track, but right at the start, it's a bit tough for the listener. But yeah, maybe that's just my own perspective. Okay, so just really quick, I think, or I feel like this track sounds a bit too dry in terms of the mix. I feel like there's some atmosphere elements way in the back with a big reverb, and then you have a lot of elements that are very dry and right at the front, but there's not really an in-between here. So I think this is what makes this track feel dry in my ears. So I think I would look at the whole three-dimensional space and try to use this whole three-dimensional space and put some elements in the middle, you know, play with the different reverb rooms with different delays or other kind of effects to create this fully layered three-dimensional sound. I feel like the focus in this track wants to be the atmospheric, the overall atmospheric space or the overall atmospheric feeling, but I feel like this focus is a bit is hiding a bit too much. So I try to amplify this atmospheric feeling. For example, if let's say I put an equalizer yeah, it definitely sounds a bit too muffled. So I would try to lift up this area a little bit more and try to bring out these ambiances in the back a bit more to make this track a bit more immersive.
Mind about the concept of harmony and music being correct. You can do whatever you want to do.
Okay, so I really like this part here, mainly because of this change of energy, and in this part there's not much of change in energy. It basically stays in one single line. Even if you change the bass notes, even if you change drum patterns and the drum sounds a little bit, the energy overall still feels like it's just one long lane. So this is why I really like this part here. And also because I feel like the focus is on the overall ambience of the track, why not introduce more of these effects? You know, where there's a lot of filtering and a lot of effects on the kick and bass and a lot of automation also on the tempo. Why not do something crazy like this and keep it as a longer part, you know, not just in one small area, but make a longer part out of this whole filtering and crazy effects to create just a nice shift from the classic 16th rolling bass line, and then you have one part where you go really wild and put all sorts of filtering stuff on it, just to have these nice contrasts of energies. And so this makes the track way more engaging, and the line of energy doesn't stay on one line, but it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes in the other direction. So that's just an idea to make it sound a bit more interesting. Okay, but I really like that you change all these drum patterns, you change all these drum sounds, but I feel like you could do the same thing with the bass line. So not only changing the notes, but changing the patterns, changing the rhythms along with these drum patterns. I think this would make the track so much more interesting. Yeah, for example, just something like this here. Why not have a whole part out of this different kick and bass pattern? I think this would introduce so much more possibilities to arrangement of this kind of genre. And in terms of mix, I think the sound is not balanced enough. I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on the low end here. But as I said earlier, I feel like this track needs more emphasis on the overall atmosphere. So I would add more brilliance. And just to see the difference, I will do something like this. So I put the equalizer on and off again. Notice how all the elements come out much more and how the track feels much more alive now. Yeah, I will leave the equalizer off for now. Now I really like this part because there's much less going on and there is a focus on one single element for me, and this is the interesting kind of chanting that is happening on the right side. So I would also try to do something like this in another area of the track, you know, where you put all the elements or most of the elements away and put the focus on one single element, which is really interesting. So in this case, it would be this chanting. would say so far this is my favorite part. So this whole part here. Just because it gives me the time to really sink into the track, you know, and I'm not blasted at full power all the way through. You know, I'm getting introduced to the key change and then the little sounds that are slowly coming in, and then the drums that are slowly coming in. So I think this is why I like this part a lot, because it allows me to flow into the track smoothly. That was some really nice filtering and effect use here, so well done. So I feel like I've heard this part already at the start of the song and in the middle of the song. So overall, about the arrangement, I would really try to focus on the more interesting part where something different is going on, you know, and I would try to expand exactly those parts. So for example, this part here. I would try to maybe expand this a bit more. Then again, you know, using some parts that are doing something wild, like this here.
1, 2, 3.
And expand this even more, you know, to create a bit more impact for the other parts. So again, I think this track needs a bit more work on the arrangement to try to create a bit more differences in the energy of the track. I mean, there are already some differences in the track, you know, with all the bass note changes and all the rhythmical drum changes, but for me this is not interesting enough. I feel like I've heard a lot of different parts already. So for example, as I said earlier, this last part, I feel like I heard the same thing in the first part or in the middle part of the track. I feel like most of the track is going again in one straight line in terms of energy, and I feel like this needs a bit more parts that are going up for a bit longer and parts that are going down for a bit longer. So again, for example, just introduce parts or make one part longer that is a bit wider in terms of different bass note patterns and different filtering and different effects. And as I said, also in this part here, to have one part that is a bit slower, and what I mean with slower, a bit less energy, a bit less elements, to really focus on just a few elements and elongate this part a bit more, to not have too much of this full straight line of energy that is only on this level. So yeah, I would try here to allow myself to break out of this 16th bass note pattern and allow myself to go crazy on one longer part. Just to have this contrast of energy. And yeah, also in terms of the mix, again, bring out the ambiences a bit more, bring out the atmosphere a bit more, make the track shine a bit more, bring more life into the track with more three-dimensional layers in terms of reverb spaces, because you have the long reverb space in the back and a dry sound in the front, and I feel like it needs something in between. I think that's it for this track. Thank you guys again for the submissions, and thanks for 100 followers. And I guess I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. You can always leave some tutorial suggestions in the comments down below. If you don't want to miss events like these where I ask you guys to send me some tracks to do feedbacks or something like that, you can follow on my Instagram to not miss any of these updates. And yeah, other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.